Jane Gillespie is one of the lucky few who can say they lived a real-life fairy tale. She was an ordinary Australian girl who ended up becoming a Balinese princess. This tale's got a bit of everything: romance, ancient palaces, and even a bit of a clash of cultures, ranging from major disagreements with the in-laws and all the way to Jane having to face the fact that she might have to share her husband with numerous other wives. Welcome to Majestique. Let's dive into how an Australian girl became the Princess of Bali. Our story begins in 1977, when Jane Gillespie was a bright 23-year-old living in Sydney. She led a fairly typical life. She worked as a kindergarten teacher, a job that held a special place in her heart because of her love for kids. But Jane also had an adventurous spirit and a passion for travel, which is how one day, seeking a little break from her routine, Jane decided to go on vacation with her family to the exotic island of Bali in Indonesia. Little did she know, this trip would end up changing her life forever. Bali, with its pristine beaches, endless greenery, and a super rich cultural heritage, was a world away from Sydney's urban setting. Jane and her family stayed at a hotel located on Royal Palace land, which was owned by Prince Chakorda Raka, Kurthiasa's brother-in-law. This was where Jane first crossed paths with Prince Raka. He wasn't your typical prince either. Not only was he handsome, but he was also deeply involved in the arts, and he even had a particular affinity for children's theater. Needless to say, the moment Jane and Raka met, sparks flew far and wide. They quickly discovered they had a lot in common, starting from their love of children to their curiosity about the different cultures around the world. Their connection was so strong that they spent nearly every day of Jane's vacation together, exploring the island and getting to know one another. And it didn't take long before Jane realized that she might have quite literally found her prince charming. But as all good things do, Jane's vacation eventually came to an end. She had to return to Sydney and resume her daily life, leaving behind the serene and enchanting life of Bali, and sadly the man she'd come to care for deeply. Now, back in Sydney, Jane got right back to her teaching job, but she couldn't shake off the memories of Bali and Prince Raka, no matter how hard she tried. Consumed in nostalgia, she realized that while she was now back home, her heart was still on that beautiful island. Not only that, but these feelings of love and care were mutual. Back in Bali, Prince Raka was thinking about Jane just as much as Jane was thinking about him. Interestingly, this was the 1970s, and communication wasn't as instantaneous as it is today. Bali didn't even have a telephone network, so staying in touch was quite a challenge. But Jane and Raka were determined to make it work regardless. They kept their romance alive through handwritten letters. Jane would wait for Raka's letters, and she'd be overwhelmed with joy when they'd arrive. Every single letter prompted vivid memories of the time they had spent together and made Jane long for him even more. As months passed, the memory of Bali and Raka grew stronger in Jane's mind. It was clear to her that Bali wasn't just a vacation spot. It had become the place where her heart belonged. Driven by this profound realization, Jane made the boldest decision of her entire life.
I don't think you can ever be prepared for what's happening. It's probably better not to be.
She resigned from her job and decided to return to Bali. She knew it was a risk, but her love for Raka ran too deep and instincts told her it was worth it. When Jane arrived back in Bali, she was greeted by Prince Raka with open arms, and without wasting any more time, he proposed, to which Jane said a resounding yes. Jane and Raka's love story was just starting to flourish into a real-life fairy tale. However, that didn't come without its fair share of challenges. Jane and Prince Raka were overjoyed with their engagement, but not everyone shared their enthusiasm. The royal family was deeply rooted in Balinese traditions, and they expected Prince Raka to marry within royal circles. As the youngest son of his father's 10th wife, Raka faced immense pressure to adhere to these expectations. But despite their insistence that he marry someone from their ranks, Raka stood firm in his love for Jane and refused to let family traditions dictate his heart. The family's resistance was intense. They even took Jane's passport and conducted a thorough background check through Interpol to ensure she was honest in her intentions. This whole ordeal was starting to look more like a scene from a spy movie than a romance novel. Security checks and all. Luckily, Jane's background was squeaky clean, leaving no reason to doubt her intentions. So, on a beautiful day in May 1978, right in the middle of the scenic beauty of Bali, Jane and Prince Raka Raka finally tied the knot. The wedding was a grand affair infused with all the rich Balinese traditions. Before the ceremony, Jane underwent a significant transformation. Her long hair was cut 12 inches on each side, and her eyebrows were shaved, a ritual signifying her transition into adulthood. This act marked Jane's first step in her immersion into the Balinese culture and traditions. And the wedding? Let's just say it was a dream. The ceremony itself was an elaborate event, involving 4 costume changes and attended by numerous villagers. Jane's parents flew in from Australia too to be part of this extraordinary occasion. The ceremony was not just a union of 2 individuals, but a fusion of 2 very different cultures. And, out of respect for her newfound kingdom, Jane even adopted the Hindu faith. In typical Balinese tradition, Jane renounced her own name and took on the name Princess Jero Asri Kurthiasa instead. And wait until you learn the meaning of her new name. Jero means from the palace, and Asri means perfect. For Jane, the wedding was a beautiful dream come true. The love and acceptance she felt made all of the cultural rituals and adjustments worth it. She had now become an essential part of the exquisite and complex landscape of Balinese royal life. But the real challenge was only just beginning. You see, it turns out that adjusting to palace life is no easy task. Life in Bali was very different from Jane's suburban comforts back in Sydney. Jane's new home was now an ancient palace, magnific in its heritage, but far from luxurious in modern terms. It was 1978 after all.
We didn't have electricity, we didn't have running water, refrigeration, telephones. Yeah, we didn't have much at all really. In those days, Ubud was a very tiny village. I think my parents were a bit shocked.
Kerosene lamps provided light, and water had to be fetched from wells. There was no means of communication with the outside world, making Jane feel isolated at times. Jane had to adapt quickly to these new living conditions, but the physical discomforts were just part of the challenge. As a Balinese princess, Jane had to immerse herself in the cultural and spiritual traditions of her new homeland. Observing sacred rituals was part of her daily life. This was quite a shift for Jane.
I went to an Anglican school. I wasn't religious at all, but so changing to Hinduism wasn't a big deal for me. It's part of daily life here. It's not something that you consciously have to do or don't do.
One of the most significant challenges for Jane was adjusting to the idea that her husband could take multiple wives, as polygamy was a part of traditional Balinese royal life. Prince Raka's father had 10 wives, and Raka, as the youngest son from the 10th wife, was expected to continue this tradition. However, Jane was not on board with this notion. She made it crystal clear to Raka that if he ever considered taking another wife, he would lose her. Essentially, it was an ultimatum. Another wife, and she'd be out. Adding to the complexity of palace life was the arrival of their first child, Max, which made things even harder. Jane had a degree in child psychology, but her modern parenting methods often clashed with the traditional expectations of the royal family. In 1980, Jane and Raka welcomed their second son, Bagas. Around this time, they made a key decision that would shape their family's future. They decided to move to Sydney to give their children a broader cultural experience and a better education. This transition was monumental, especially for Prince Raka. You see, his parents had cut him off as a result of this decision, so he had to take on jobs as a gardener and waiter to make ends meet. From royalty to manual labor was a stark contrast. Can you imagine? Jane's parents welcomed them with open arms, helping them settle into their new life in Sydney. Despite the struggle, the children, Max, Bagas, and later their daughter Maya, were able to experience both Balinese and Australian cultures. They grew up in Sydney, but still always felt a strong connection to Bali, so the family moved back and forth a lot between these two incredibly different cultures. Max, who was born in Bali, was the one who felt the strongest connection to his roots back home. So, once he reached his teenage years, he decided to move back to Bali to live as Prince Jock Gus. He embraced his role in the royal family and became a deeper involved in local traditions. Maya, on the other hand, faced some pretty unique challenges growing up as a young girl in between two starkly different cultures. The expectations of what was acceptable for a young woman in Western culture versus Indonesian culture very often clashed, leaving her feeling caught between between two worlds. Despite these challenges, she managed to balance it all out by sticking close to her tight-knit family. After all, she had a lot to learn from both Jane and Raka in terms of what living in between two cultures looked like. That being said, Maya became a Balinese princess in her own right, carrying on the family's impressive legacy. As for Jane, well, she embraced the duality of their lives, and she made sure that her children were equally at home no matter where they went, be it Sydney or Bali. But while adapting to a new way of life, Jane and Raka started missing their home in Bali again. Their hearts always longed to return to the place where their love story began. Fast forward to 2011, and Max was preparing for a grand wedding of his own. He had met his future wife, Happy Salma, an Indonesian TV personality, while she was on vacation in Bali.
Nervous for my wedding. Excited too, and yeah.
Much like his parents' story, Max's romance with Happy was a blend of spontaneity and destiny. Their wedding was set to be a major day-long event held at the Royal Palace in Ubud, and over 2,500 guests were in attendance, including high priests and diplomats. The royal family continued to grow and evolve. Prince Raka became the head of culture and religion in Ubud, earning the title the Wise One. In this role, he guided the community in preserving Balinese traditions while adapting to modern times. Meanwhile, Princess Asri, Max, and their extended family ran a successful restaurant named Biku, which became renowned for its high tea and eclectic mix of old Indonesia and old England. For the family, Biku was more than just a business. It symbolized the blending of cultures that had defined their lives. Tourists would visit, eager to see the princesses in action. The restaurant quickly became a beloved spot, known not just for its delicious menu, but also for its warm and inviting atmosphere, reflecting Jane's genuine love for connecting with people. The royal family's commitment to maintaining cultural traditions while embracing modernity was apparent in every aspect of their lives. Whether it was through their ceremonies, culinary offerings, or community involvement, they found ways to honor their heritage while keeping pace with the ever-changing world. Today, more than 45 years have passed since Jane Gillespie became Princess Asri. At nearly 71 years old, she remains as stunning and graceful as ever. The couple's love has stood the test of time. They still go on dates, eat popcorn, and watch movies together. Occasionally, they grant even interviews where they share their incredible love story with the world. What's more, their 3 children are all married and have families of their own now. Princess Asri and Prince Raka enjoy spending time with their grandchildren, always caring for them no matter where they are. Despite the challenges they faced, Jane never gave up on their love. From the moment she saw Raka, she knew he was the one, and after all these years, he still is.
That's a long time love story. It's destiny, yeah, in English, destiny.
Reflecting on her journey, Jane occasionally chuckles at how surreal her life has been. From an ordinary girl in Sydney to a princess in Bali, her tale is one of resilience, adaptability, and timeless love. Jane's story sends a powerful message about the transformative power of love and the beauty that can arise from embracing cultural differences. So, what do you think of this fairy tale love story? Thanks for joining me in exploring this incredible story. If you enjoyed it, leave a comment below with your thoughts and let me know what other stories you'd like to hear. Until next time, take care and keep believing in the magic of love and adventure. See you soon.